Thank you all so much for coming out on this drizzly Tuesday afternoon to Malvern Books. We're super excited to be hosting Natalia, Charlotte, and David, and very excited to be also celebrating the launch of David's debut novel, White Plains. It's also National Teacher Day, so remember to thank an educator. So tonight we're going to start off with Charlotte Gullick. She is a novelist, essayist, editor, educator, and chair of the creative writing department at Austin Community College. She graduated with a MFA in Creative Nonfiction from the Institute of American Indian Arts in May 2016. Charlotte's first novel, By Way of Water, was chosen by Jayne Anne Phillips as the grand prize winner of the Santa Fe Writers Project Literary Awards program. Her other awards include a Christopher Isherwood Fellowship for Fiction, a Colorado Council on the Arts Fellowship for Poetry, a MacDowell Colony Residency, a Ragdale Residency, Faculty of the Year from College of the Redwoods, as well as the Evergreen State College 2012 Teacher Excellence Award. Thank you, Charlotte, for being a teacher.
Hi, everybody. Thanks for coming. I once took a class with Chandra. She's an amazing writer. There's so many former students and peers and colleagues. It's really exciting to be here. Thank you, Malvern, for having us and being this awesome book space. I am lucky this week because I get to teach a group of pastors about writing for public life, and most of them are here tonight. I chose the non-cussy parts of my book. They might be disappointed because of that. They are awesome. We've been doing it for 2 days, and it's been super cool. So I'm really excited to be with them, and I'm thanking you guys for coming tonight. It's really cool. I'm going to read from a second novel that I've written 6 times, and now I'm writing a 7th time, and I'm hoping that it is going to work this time. And it's called One Man Reservation. It's about a character who's the first in her family to graduate from college, and she goes home to help her father die. And one person asked me, does this mean she puts a pillow over his face? That's not what I mean over his face, that's not what I mean. But I'm going to read a scene that is where she meets an older man, a professor, and his name is Chad. Her name is Zane. Her father's name is Will. Her sister's name is Angela, and I don't think the brother's name is Angela. What you need to know about Zane is that she can't cook, and she has more chips on her shoulder than I do. But before I begin, I'm going to take it too much time. When I was working on my first book, I was working on my first grad program, and I was told I couldn't write it the way I wanted to write it. And so I stopped writing and started drinking a lot. And then I got asked to house sit for somebody in Colorado. And through that person, I met David Hicks. And I was really, really stuck as a writer. And I would work, and then I would call, and I would read what I had written to David, and he'd say, keep going, keep going. I wouldn't have a first novel if it weren't for David. So it's really exciting to get to read with you. And I never imagined that, so it's really cool. So this is from One Man Reservation. Oh, they're at a potluck. Chad cleared his throat and said, I meant to ask you about your name. He sipped his wine. Unusual. Her name is Zane. I looked harder at him. I knew he was a professor, but I didn't know of what subject. Maybe he was flirting, or maybe he wanted to make fun of me. I could never tell. It seemed flirting always held a smidge of mockery, all of it a little ridiculous, and I certainly wasn't schooled in the ways of being coy and coquettish. Those were the traits of characters in novels. And my parents' courtship had included rifles and targets, and then on their 3rd date, Holly had gutted a deer in the rain. These skills didn't exactly carry over to the academic world. Finally, I said to Chad, my father was into Westerns. Basically, my family starts where the Jodes left off. I thought this was a hilarious summation, and it cut short the questions and shocked looks about growing up in a town of 200, a graduating class of 6, the nights when the lights were turned off, the days of little to eat. Yes, indeed, we do have that kind of poverty in the United States, believe it or not. And no, my parents had never taken anything from the government, and they worked so much harder than anyone at this party. Well, I didn't know everyone, but sometimes it seemed that way. I didn't know why I came to such potlucks. The invisible threads and networks that were at play seemed important, and if I didn't step into them, small slights took place. A name left off a class roster, a denial for funding for a conference even though I'd had a paper accepted. I had liked that Chad's name was also a destination. It seemed like he could take me places. I looked at the food on the table in front of us. It was potluck, and my peers had brought rich dishes, shrimp and cocktail sauce, mini quiches, something called bacon mashed potato cheese bombs. I'd brought Funyuns again. And I was hanging around the wine. It was nice to be close in case I needed a refill. Chad was forced to step close while someone passed by. He smelled good, clean, crisp, solid. It probably was the shallowest of reasons to accept his request for a date, then to cohabitate with him. That and the good wine and the no rent. There are so many ways to compromise oneself. I moved in 2 months later, and the invitation for Angela's wedding had been forwarded to his house, and I hid it, walking past him to the living room as he opened a bottle of wine to breathe. He imagined himself an informal sommelier, and he could tell anyone who asked about the pairings of lamb and a fruit-driven Bordeaux. I knew I was drinking a lot, but I was also learning, I told myself. I half paid attention to his lectures. There wasn't going to be a quiz, I thought. Chad schooled his fair lady, and later I was expected to participate in dinner party conversations about a certain bottle's structure. I picked up enough to discuss the wine's backbone and tannins, residual sugars, but I was faking it, both my interest in these aspects of the drink and my understanding of them. I got into the habit of saying, "Let me take another sip," before I answered a question about the given vintage. I'd swirl the glass like Chad had taught me, stick my snoz into it, and take too big a swallow. Usually Chad or some other dude at the table would take the pause to insert themselves. I was beginning to see a pattern. Men didn't typically ask questions at these gatherings. Instead, they were waiting for the moment to prove what they knew. After one such party, I asked Chad on the way home why he talked so much. He bristled, did that thing with his shoulders. "I'm sharing myself. It's called being generous." For me, the term finish meant pouring the last of it into my glass. I could talk literature, music, film, but I stayed silent in the discussions of art. The only static images I'd known in the small room of my home were a Curtis print of Sitting Bull and a photograph of my grandfather astride a horse, a stretch of open meadow behind him. Instead of Cole, Church, and Bierstadt, I'd furtively jotted their names on a napkin one night while in a bathroom at a wine bar. I remembered the sweep of mountains ringing the valley where I'd grown up, or the Eel River's curve and quiet certainty. The landscape of my youth was grander than anything these pompous fools around me would ever know, or so I like to tell myself. Angela's handwriting slanted on the envelope as if things were already going downhill, even before I opened it. I sat on Chad's red leather couch, a gift from his mother when he bought this Craftsman. The couch wasn't comfortable or welcoming. Anytime I wore a skirt, my legs stuck to it, and I didn't feel so classy peeling myself off. And he was a little precious about it. I couldn't put my feet up on it, not even to a comfortable curl when we watched a movie. Always French, often black and white, and certainly no popcorn. Despite all of that, I felt rich when I sat on the couch, as I imagined that to be affluent required a certain amount of constant physical discomfort. I mean, the guilt alone had to be oppressive. Chad's decade more of experience with life seemed like a rudder then, a combination of comfort and judgment. I turned up the volume on the comfort as I read over the details of my sister's wedding invitation. It would be a small ceremony at the ranch by the old apple tree in the creek. I tried to imagine Chad there, in an Armani suit. He had 4, all gifts from his mother. Would Chad speak down to my father? Would he comment on the lack of alcohol? Will never touched it. The potluck offerings, nothing catered. How could I take anyone home who described the working class as the proletariat? I didn't tell Chad about the invitation. I tucked it into my journal, the one I usually only turned to when I was, well, say, tipsy. The next Sunday, I was still in bed when I heard the click, click, click of Chad's cycling shoes. He stopped in the bedroom doorway, decked out in his bike wear, overly tight shorts, shaved legs, racing jersey. He cleared his throat, and I rolled over in his high thread count sheets. Are you going to sleep all day? The fish tank gurgled like it had places to be as well. The bedside clock said it was 8:30, and this way, and maybe only in this way, Chad was like my father. I mean, getting a burn. I called Angela while he was out to say I couldn't come because I had a conference that weekend. That was true. I didn't tell her that I could have easily canceled. All she said was, typical, but paused. The silence had stretched, and I wanted to explain, but I hadn't told my sister, brother, or father about Chad, that I was living with him, let alone dating him. The night after I told Angela I couldn't come, I decided to make dinner to distract myself. Chad had come and gone again, and we not said much to each other. I wanted to prove to him that I was not a complete idiot, so I pulled out Holly, her mother's joy of cooking. I chose a quiche because even though it was a she breakfast dish, it had artisan ingredients, roasted tomatoes, herbs, goat cheese, and Chad loved, simply adored goat cheese. And sometimes Holly would make us breakfast for dinner, and it was the best. She sang and noodled around the kitchen like she didn't on the more standard evening meal nights. I liked the idea of bringing some of her into the house with Chad. And she made the best crusts, and I made them with her, crimping the edges together in just the right way. But after she died, I had not made or helped with the crust, even though Angela tried at least every 6 months to coax me into it. I'd done everything right with the filler ingredients. I roasted the tomatoes without burning them while I mixed the dough for the crust. The part about the ice water seemed like overkill. I didn't remember Holly or Angela doing that. I laid it out on the counter using an empty wine bottle for the rolling pin. The one Chad had was made of Carrara marble, and it was too heavy. He told me all about it, and where the quarry it came from, how he'd driven up the steep roads to get to it. He held it one night during dinner, caressing it as he shared that it was the same marble that was used for Michelangelo's David, the Pantheon, the column of Marcus Aurelius. When I held it, I was sure I could feel the whole of European history bearing down on me. The dough wouldn't roll well, and I did exactly what the directions said not to do, overwork it. But I eventually got a big enough roundish shape and placed it into the glass dish. I completed the rest of the steps and baked that sucker. It smelled good. When Chad took a bite, his lips flattened like they did when the wait service was bad. He was figuring out how to be encouraging but still honest. I was so glad I was never one of his students. He wiped the corner of his mouth with the cloth napkin. I like the cheese. And I took a sip of the Riesling he'd chosen. He cleared his throat. The crust is a bit stalwart. The sound of Angela's voice, the hurt she carried in the one word, the agonizing pause, the silent blame for so many things rose in me. Chad took another bite, holding his knife and fork in what I'd come to think of as the European style. I downed my wine, grabbed the remaining quiche like a frisbee, and went to the back door. I flung the stalwart disc of food off the back of the back steps into the lush greenness of the yard. The circle of failure flew away from us with surprising grace. It sailed like it was meant for flying, not eating. It landed in a chokecherry bush, hanging there for a moment. Chad came up behind me. Together we watched the quiche tumble into a lower branch, then fall apart as it hit the ground. I was sure some squirrel would think it had hit the jackpot. He giggled. That was better than a sugar glider. I was just glad I hadn't shoved it in his face.